I think it's been a while since I went live on my channel. Greetings, happy Tuesday. You are watching Celestic Intelligence Podcast with your host, me, Amelie, and I am so happy to be here today. And today we're going to be talking about hardened hearts. And in some of this really deep discovery of the silencing of the feminine voice, this is for both men and women. And I always like to preface that, like, this is not a bit about specific genders. This is emotional intelligence and social intelligence healing for everybody. And I met with a client last week, and he said that in watching these, that his communication with his wife and with his mother, or with his daughter, those are both improved relationships. So when you take some of these things into consideration that I'm saying, it is very, very helpful for you in connecting with that. So let's just get started. So what is a hardened heart? So a hardened heart, in most of the context, is this spiritual resistance that you have. Today, we're going to be looking at not just the spiritual aspect of it, but we're going to be looking at the emotional and then also the social aspect of a hardened heart, how that plays out, why we do that, and get into that. So I hope that this is going to bring in a lot of awareness. I see a lot of this. I have some of these symptoms, and so there is a cost to the hardening. And so let's bring some awareness to it, that maybe we can soften up a little bit. So, first of all, like, welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 33, and I appreciate you guys for coming in and watching. I know that as you guys may know, if you've ever watched any of my other content, I am always appreciative of the viewers and people that are paying attention to the podcast. Chetin, hi, hello. Tigran, hello. So this is going to speak clearly to those who have built up really solid walls in order to survive. And so in that, you kind of harden your castle walls, you kind of harden your heart to protect yourself from any situation. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So you build up these walls energetically, socially. You might be isolating because you don't want to integrate with others because of the possibility of getting hurt. And this is a way of you protecting your inner self. So physically, you might start feeling some of that. Emotionally, you might not even want to connect with others because you're feeling that you're going to get hurt, that it's threatening you, that if you connect with some people, you might even fear death. Did you make that tiger or no? Tiger. Oh, this is a bear. My wall is nice. It's cute. Um, all right. So let's get started. So a hardened heart, if you've ever read the Bible, we're going to get into more archetypal stories, but if you've ever read the Bible or ever heard the story of Moses and the Pharaoh, you'll know that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but Pharaoh also hardened his own heart. And so that is kind of the inspiration that I pulled from in order to bring this message to you guys today. So there is in a spiritual term, a hardened heart is a protective spiritual resistance that is rooted in self-preservation. I'm in Oregon, America, United States. And then when we look at it in emotional terms, a hardened heart might come across as being numb. So there might be some numbness in that you don't feel the feelings, because feeling the feelings is going to hurt. It's going to feel painful. And then, as we're protecting ourselves, we want to protect ourselves from pain. We want to protect ourselves from death. We want to protect ourselves from being hurt. And that's what the survival state is. So when your nervous system is in that survival state, think about freezing. So if you're a deer and you hear something, you're going to freeze. And so you're going to look around, you're going to, stop breathing, which is part of the nervous system response, is to stop breathing so you're not heard, and then to feel as small as possible so that predators don't come and interact with you, that you're unseen. So that numbness comes from this frozen fear state. And, the fights may not necessarily be a part of this, but if somebody is threatening you directly, you might react and say, something to keep them away, or even say, I don't like the way that this feels, and so I don't want to see you anymore, or please don't interact with me anymore. And so there's like that isolation. I don't need you. I'm independent. I don't want you around me. Don't interact with me. So emotionally, there's this guardedness. Maybe you don't even know your own emotions because you're so used to having these really deep castle walls around you, this really deep emotional barrier between you and your loved ones, or you and your friends, that guardedness is going to come in. So this is a reaction in a hardened heart kind of way. Hi, Mike. Good to see you. I was thinking about you. I was like, I haven't heard from Mike. I hope he's okay. You're my number one fan. And I like it. All right. And then the next piece of the emotionally hardened heart is this avoidance of vulnerability. So in being vulnerable, that's like being seen, right? You're a lot bigger. You're not this small. You're not making yourself small. If you being vulnerable, you make yourself big. You're seen. You go and you dance in the public, or you sing in public, and then you're being, all eyes are on you, or maybe some eyes are on you, and the avoidance of that is a sign that you have a little bit of a hardened heart, that you're protecting yourself. And then socially, we've been talking about that, but there's going to be a disconnection where if you go into a public space, you're going to have a hard time, opening up a conversation with somebody. You're going to feel a little disconnected from others because you're not even connected with yourself. If you're if you're in a hardened heart space and you're feeling emotionally numb, you're feeling guarded, and you're avoiding being vulnerable, then in a social context, you're definitely not going to want to go and connect with people because you're not connected with yourself. I was reading about this really beautiful research piece. Let me talk to you guys about it. So, many of you might be familiar with Newton's cradle. So a Newton's cradle is that device, and it has the little hanging balls, and you pull a ball and it hits it, and then it demonstrates the kinetic energy of, it just demonstrates kinetic energy. You pull one ball, it hits the four balls, and then one of them bounces out that way, right? So that's the kinetic energy of Newton's cradle. That's what they're called. And so in that in that there was a study done in 2024, and it was called synchronization of Newton's cradle. So synchronization behavior of Newton's cradle. So researchers modeled the Newton's cradle, and they put many of these Newton's cradles in the same area, right? And then each of the researchers or somebody pulled one of the balls on each of these cradles, and so that it was in a discord. So it wasn't in tandem. It wasn't at the same time. So you have this, you can imagine if you've ever heard the sound, you have this like mass clicking sound. But what they found is that even though there was this initial disturbance of the collisions, that the pendulums eventually settled in synchronized oscillation. What does that mean? After a period of time, all of the pendulums that were, at first there was a little, disturbing sound as discord and just a lot of clicking. After a period of time, the amplitude gradually got into a coherent rhythm. So eventually, all of the cradles were knocking at the same time. So instead of being click, 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 it was click, 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 or whatever, the rhythm was for that. So the notable thing here is that resonance between the radial and angular motion strongly affects on how quickly the synchronization happens. And the big thing that I am looking at this, because we are all made of energy, frequency, and vibration. So if we're looking at the frequency, what is happening here, if we are all our own cradles, is that when you're around others, eventually your nervous systems will start to connect in a coherent fashion to where now you can be connected with others. But you have to be connected with yourself. The frequency locking is called entrainment, and that is when the nearby pendulums are all now clicking in the same frequency. Like they're in the same motion, the same influence. And then the 2024 study also demonstrated the resonance between the directions of the motion can modulate how fast the synchronization can occur. And anybody that is interested in this is a Cornell study. It's called Synchronization Behavior of Newton's Cradle. And it was a 2024 study. So if you want to look it up for yourself, please feel free to. But I want to bring in that the multiple pendula that are on their own vibration, that they're on their own frequency, eventually become entrained with each other because resonance is everything. Now, when we're looking at emotions and we're looking at our social engagements, we're all energy beings. Like energy is, or emotions are energy in motion. So when you get a feeling, that emotion is telling your body something. It's a frequency that's in your body that's telling you something. So going back into, what the socially hardened heart is that when we're feeling disconnected, we're kind of like all of those cradles that are clicking at their own speed because we don't have a soul tribe. We don't have a connection. We're hardened in our hearts and we are separated from the rest. And we're very much a social being. We need to have that social connection in order to feel whole and valued and purposeful. And even in that purpose, like if you have purposelessness, that is the that is really hurtful to just your own being because it really is related to this death. Like you feel lost, you feel disconnected. And so really addressing that is very, very important. And, that's something that I do talk about in my work is finding what your purpose is and working it out and sharing it with others. The other pieces of heart and heart in a social context is judgment. So you might have been judged, or you might be judging others So think about when you go onto a social media platform. You're scrolling and you're looking and you're like, oh my gosh, this person appears successful. This person appears successful and I'm not. And so you start comparing yourself. And then in that, you're like kind of judging others or and really not knowing what's going on behind the curtain. So, social media, and I talk about this in my Digital Age series, social media is this digital self. So, there is a little bit of disconnection, but if you're looking at the social avatars and comparing it to your own self, that judgment can be directed inwardly. And so you start to feel a little hurt inside. So then you're not really connecting well with others. The other piece is control dynamics. So if you find yourself having to control everything going on around you in order to, like that control, from what can tell from my own personal experience, because I used to be very controlling. And I did that as a way to kind of set the pawn pieces and set everything in order so that I wasn't surprised, that I wasn't disappointed, that I knew everything that was going on. And in controlling everything, that in turn would protect my insides, protect my heart. And so doing that socially where you're just, I don't want to see you anymore, I don't want to be around you anymore, leaving jobs, getting new jobs, finding new friends, and finding new things to do, those might be a little controlling instead of being really soft and going with the flow, which is a very much different softened heart vibe, right? And then isolation, which is masked as independence. So, if you are experiencing a hardened heart, like I said, you might be pushing a lot of these social relationships away in order to just stay in your own space and be isolated. And that is viewed as independence. So, instead of being, I don't want to say codependence, but it's interdependence, which is the opposite of independence. So in America and in most of the westernized countries, independence is highly valued and highly favorable as part of our culture. But if you went to like an Asian country, there's a lot of family, interdependent community connection that is a little bit different. So you look at, the social environments a lot differently in those particular cultures. So there is a little bit of culturalism. Now, if somebody was in an interdependent country and they started isolating, they would have a lot of support around them of, okay, why are you isolating? Because everyone is really interdependent on each other for various needs. Okay, so now that we've really defined the hardened heart, let's talk about the emotional consequences of the hardened heart. So, the first emotional consequence is lack of empathy and lack of emotional intimacy. So, this is where you will still be protected and you're not necessarily going to be able to open up intimately with others about the things that are going on in your life. So, the emotional consequence is maybe holding on to that emotion that you're feeling, or maybe even being numb to the emotion and not knowing what you're feeling. And that will kind of increase this disconnection from your emotional relationship that you have with yourself and then the one that you have with others. People really like emotions. They love to see joy. They love to see, like, I was watching Best of Beth Dutton, and she's just this really brash Lilith type archetype that says what's on her mind and goes out, and she has this really keen ability of like reading people. And so she's like really in a dark feminine archetypal character. And it can appear that she has lack of empathy and maybe even some lack of emotional intimacy, because at some point that she got to that position because she's playing out a character. I haven't seen all of Yellowstone, so I can't really say much to that, but I was just watching some of her best moments and I was like, oh, okay, that's very interesting. Like she's using truth telling in this really directed, piercing way and using it. I don't want to say, maybe it's a little bit manipulative, but it's like this dark feminine energy that she's carrying. But it shows the power of that feminine voice, and it doesn't have to be a woman that uses it. It could be a man as well. Anybody who's truth telling and speaking truth to power is using a feminine form of voice. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're feminized, but that that is the power and benefit of connecting to that feminine energy that you have. Another emotional consequence is a fear of being seen or a fear of being chosen. And, this one, like I said in the beginning, when we're talking about the survival mechanisms, if you're in this feeling small or thinking if you're going to be like kind of the good girl, good boy behavior, and that will help you get chosen, that is, unlikely to happen. You have to be able to speak your voice. When I was talking about the cradles, these Newton's cradles, if we think about it, the energy is the cradle. So if we're looking at our energy, that is the cradle, for kind of comparing it as a metaphor to our own, bodies. And then the voice that we have is the strike. It's the thing that starts the kinetic energy in motion. So when you hold the resonance with your essence, these are the the people around you will start to resonate and match you without having force. There's going to be little resistance. So sitting in that fear is going to, it's not necessarily going to connect you. You might find other like-minded people if you start sharing how being unseen makes you feel or how not being chosen makes you feel. You might start resonating with people once you start sharing your voice, because that voice that you have is a strike of energy. It starts the energy in motion. It starts that kinetic energy of finding those who resonate with you. And this is demonstrated, you can see it on social media. Somebody makes a social media post and then people will like it because they're resonating with it. So you'll see what people are resonating with, and then based on the number of likes, and then you can see what people are not resonating with, and you can look at how many people are exposed to that and see, okay, is this a resonance or is this not a resonance? The next emotional consequence of holding a hardened heart is this constant self sabotage, which is masked as self reliance. And one thing, the reason why I brought this up is I noticed in this last week, because I'm constantly doing energy work on myself, that with all of the stories, I'm just looking at the trends and looking at where things are going, where my energy is moving, that there's almost this dependence on pain, because somewhere along the line, my nervous system associated pain with growth. It associated suffering with progress. That suffering or that pain or the grief is almost associated in my nervous system as love, that or connection, or making another step deeper into my psyche, into who I am, this bigger path of personal mastery. And so now, because of that, I'm working on shifting that and changing it from pain is growth, suffering is success, into, you don't have to hold that pattern anymore. And, part of this is like I have suffered a lot of loss of family members, of just big changes in my life in the last 5 years. And, part of me is like, is that self sabotage, or is it self, you know, actualization? Like, am I actually getting to a place where my emotions are, open and out there, and I'm sharing what I need to share with the world? But it is kind of a weird association, and it sits in your nervous system, and that's why it continues to play out, because if you don't start cleaning those up, if you don't have awareness of that, and you continue down that path, then you are going to continue that story, because I don't want to say our brains are archaic, but this there is this disconnect with what's fiction and what's reality in our minds, because the neural pathways, the synapses, they're all firing on the same, whether it's pain or whether it's success, whether it's suffering or whether it's a goal achievement. Your brain is processing all of that the same, because not that it's archaic, it's just it's a simple yet very complex process that, your nervous system operates under. Okay, moving on to the social consequences. So, the social consequences of having a hardened heart can be having these power imbalances in your love life, in your family life, in your community life. And what does that mean? It means that if you're, we were talking about how socially there's a disconnection, there's judgment, there's control dynamics, and then there's also this isolation that is showing up as hyper vigilance or hyper independence. And the power imbalances could be role reversal. It could be, somebody just being the authoritarian in a relationship and somebody just being kind of the servant of whatever the authoritarian is saying. So if you're experiencing, that's kind of the control dynamic I was talking about. So if there is a power imbalance, like if you're not working in a co-creative, cohesive relationship where each one is serving the other, and you have this like master dom relationship. Hi, Zendaji. Just walk away. Why should you react at all? Oh, I'm missing some comments. You are looking so beautiful. Thank you, Gabby. Gabelle. Just walk away. Why should you react at all? I don't know which context you were talking about lift me up, but if you're here, walking away is good, but also speaking truth to power is also good. And doing it in a way that's confident and in a strong feminine voice is also important. So, nice to see you too, Zindaji. All right. So, as we look at power imbalances, we can see this on not just this fractal microcosm, but you can see it in a macrocosm with nations and in these, bigger spheres. So, even power imbalances in government settings, power imbalances in like an educational institution, or even the power imbalance in like a religious institution, you can see these things play out. Think about if you've ever had a boss that a boss or a manager, or maybe even an owner of a company that is unregulated, and how their lack of regulation caused this really weird dynamic within the rest of the company. Or maybe you haven't seen that. I'm like nerdy and I'm always looking for all this stuff, all the information, and whittling it down. But if you're looking at the power imbalance in that relation, in that like business model where, the founder or the CEO is unregulated, and then you can only imagine like how, because of their lack of vision, their lack of voice, their lack of regulation, maybe they'll fly off the handle, they'll get really aggressive, because emotionally that they're trying to guard themselves, like of the vulnerable state that maybe the business is in. And so you can see how that power imbalance can filter down into the employees below, because at some point you'll feel it. Like I had a manager who really protected me from it, but some of the stories that I heard in the meetings that they were having were shocking. Like I wouldn't even have imagined it if I hadn't heard, the story of what happened in those situations. And it's comes from this hardened heart of thinking that, they don't need to use the feminine energy of wisdom or understanding or knowledge or trusting the community or connecting with their employees in a way that is positive, but really having this power imbalance. Like wanting the power and wanting to hold the authority, but not wanting to do the responsibility of what it takes, whatever the authority is. So maybe you can even look at this in a familial state. Lots of people that were raised with a mother who was overbearing and maybe even abusive to the children. Maybe it was you that happened to, or maybe it was the father that happened to. So, at the top, you're watching a father and mother relationship where they're not working in a connected and uncontrolling way. They're, maybe they're battling for control, or maybe even the father just was like, I'm not even going to fight her. Whatever she says goes. That's a power imbalance. And so you start to see the social consequences in your own life, because that has some sort of imprint on you. You are in that frequency of disconnection. I'm just full of feline energy. Hi, Jerusha. Hi, Abigail. I mean, feminine energy. I love that. Feminine energy is good. I mean, a balance of both within ourselves. You might even see that within yourself, the imbalance. So, moving on, the other social consequences that can happen are generational mistrust and attachment wounds. And it's important to outline this because you may feel like it's your issue, but a lot of the times it can be some sort of generational thing that was passed on to you. So think of like generational curses or generational wounds. So, I have a Native American background. And so there's a lot of wounding that comes in from that. Not only was there just massacres and genocides that happened within, some of those roots, those tribal roots that I have, but then there's also this mistrust of each other. There's a lot of imbalance within the community, from a governmental level, from a management level. And so even though I wasn't raised around that energy is still passed down to me from my father and from my grandfather. And so really looking at the consequences of those imbalances, the mistrust, maybe even the abandonment. Like I said, we have attachment wounds, that being abandoned or being rejected, and or maybe your parents had their own wounds that they could not handle, and so because of that it made some sort of effect on you, because from a DNA perspective, like that was passed down to you. So when we have a hardened heart, those will just continue getting passed down unless we start to take action for those. Now, the last one, I kind of spoke about it a little bit, but tyranny disguised as leadership. And then activism without compassion. So tyranny disguised as leadership. Tyranny is a very controlling, masculine type energy. And, when I was talking about behind closed doors in the boardroom, if there's abuse going on, like actively with the leadership team, and or even in like a family relationship where maybe a mother's overbearing or a father's overbearing, that's tyranny. And that's still, like, they're still trying to lead, but they haven't like done the emotional regulation work. And if that happens, then there's going to be some sort of social consequence, either for the children, for even extended family, or in a business relationship for the employees. There's consequences that happen when there is these dynamics that are being misused or abused. And then activism without compassion, just going and doing things to appear to be good, to appear to hold compassion, but not really having compassion for whatever the thing that you're activate that you're doing an activism based situation with. If you don't have that compassion, if you're not really connected, you're just going out and doing the things, it's going to appear empty. Like you're basically building this empty frame. And I talked about that, I think it was last week in Wisdom Danced. You're really, if you don't have, like, what we're talking about in a softened heart is really feminine energy. In a softened heart, you're going to have empathy. In a softened heart, you're going to have compassion. In a softened heart, you're going to be connected, and you're able to be emotionally intimate and loving and connected and seen for that. Like, people are going to come to you for that. We have Native American bloodlines too. Our grandmother Golda, who my dad talks about all the time on the stream, was a Cherokee girl who was blinded by a doctor, gave her the wrong eye medicine. Oh my goodness. Oof. So those are some of the social consequences of having this hardened heart. Now, the next one is we're going to talk about spiritual consequences. Spiritual consequences are, it's really this spiritual resistance that you're going to have in connecting with something that is of the divine order. I call the divine order is just being connected to the heavenly realms, being connected to the divine realms, and receiving the information from that. So if you are within this hardened heart, you're going to have dissonance in your divine flow. So you're not going to be able to get the messages. You're not going to be able to connect your spirit with the divine. And that can feel very isolating. It might make you feel alone. It could, there is certain spiritual consequences to that. And we'll get a little bit more into that with some of our archetypal stories that we're going to be talking about in a moment. And then there's an inability to receive. So, it's going to be difficult to receive love. It's going to be difficult to see beauty or even see beauty in things. It's going to be difficult because you're resisting the divine revelations that can happen. I did a series, or I did a podcast called Burst of Brilliance. And it really means that you have to rest in your body in order to receive these brilliant divine moments, either in guidance, decision making, artistic expression, things like that. If you don't have that connection and you're not receiving the messages to get your bursts of brilliance, you're withholding that revelation that could be blocking you in your life. Got some Taino Indian over here. Woohoo! Look, you got number 1 on your commenting. And then the inability to receive God, the inability to receive wisdom. So the inability to connect to the divine order, which is logos and wisdom. And those the spiritual consequences of that may make you feel a little wayward, a little lost in the world because you don't have that connection to your creator, which is it's important, especially if you're here for service of that divine order. And as I mentioned, that wisdom is blocked, and wisdom is that understanding, knowledge, and ability to see the unseen, the ability to connect. It's, when Solomon sat with wisdom, and I talked about that in Wisdom Dance. So if you missed that podcast, I highly recommend going back and listening to that. But when he sat with wisdom, when he brought wisdom in, he asked for it, in a dream as a child to rule the nation of Israel. The moment that he left sitting with wisdom, the kingdom separated, it cracked, there was an imbalance. And so when you block that wisdom and you let it go, the feminine principle is silenced. You silence wisdom within your own self. And that's, when we talk about Sophia, Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom in the New Testament. And so that Sophia wisdom, when that gets disconnected, then you have this disconnect from the divine order. So those are some of the spiritual consequences. And now we're going to talk about the archetypal stories. So one of the stories that obviously I used Hardened Heart because of Pharaoh and Moses' story. So Pharaoh hardened his heart, which was a resistance. So he had a spiritual resistance, maybe even emotional and a social resistance in the context. But because of that, he hardened his heart. And then eventually God hardened his heart. So he was completely stoned, like his heart was completely stoned, right? And so this story is going from that resistance to liberation. So once his heart was softened, then he liberated, right? Then the freedom could happen. Then he let the people go. But he had so much resistance up until that point. And a lot of people suffered because of it. In Ezekiel's prophecy, he says, I will remove their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. And so again, you're looking at this resistance to liberation. So when you're able to soften that heart, it really is this freedom. And, if we are looking at some of the consequences and we're looking at the context of the social, emotional, and spiritual integrations of what that hardened heart looks like, what that softened heart looks like, then we can see where that heart of flesh is just, this soft, warm, loving place to be, where vulnerability isn't a threat. Your vulnerability is your connection to others. The other story is Medusa. So I did, I think it was last week or maybe the week before last, I did a podcast on Medusa. And, she was a violated woman and then made into a monster and, exiled from the Athena's temple. And when she was made into a monster, her heart hardened because she felt betrayed. And, a lot of us can't really disagree with that she was betrayed, because she was, instead of having an ear of compassion or a warm embrace from Athena, Athena instead curses her with a hair full of snakes and a piercing gaze that turns anyone that she looks on or that looks at her into stone, which is all archetypal stories. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more about the Medusa story, I go into full detail in the Medusa effect, and I think that was episode 31. The next one is Sophia getting cast out. So when wisdom is rejected, humanity starts spiraling. When wisdom is rejected, humanity starts spiraling. Okay? And if you start looking at this lens of spiral, so look at the protests, look at, the disagreements that are happening, look at some of the things that happen maybe in companies that are kind of falling apart. I was what was it? There was a company where the CEO and the HR person were having an affair and they got caught in that Coldplay concert. Like, and they're both married, so they're both like out of balance in their own relationships. And then they go and, are kind of publicly humiliated, but, they put themselves into that arena. I can only imagine, if they were keeping that relationship, what the rest of the company feels, even before they were caught. Somebody probably knew that there was something going on because feminine wisdom can see the unseen. And that's something that I noticed about like Beth Dutton. She can pierce and see and read people really, really well. And she uses that to her advantage because she's a dark feminine archetype. But she's also, she is dark feminine archetype, which holds this like kind of wild rage mother nature type energy. So you never know what's going to happen. If you're going to be, directed in her gaze, is she going to destroy you? And that's where the mother, that mother portion comes in. The last archetype or sacred story I want to talk about is the crucifixion. So the hardened hearts of the Pharisees and Sadducees demanded Christ's death. They demanded his death. And they had to use another agency, the Roman government, in order to carry out that crucifixion. So they put it on Pontius Pilate, who was supposed to be managing the Jews at that time. But because of their hardened hearts, they couldn't hear the wisdom of Christ, because Christ is the full embodiment of logos and of wisdom. He's got the co-creation of both within him, and that's what makes him a very important character in our lives. They had hardened hearts. They couldn't hear the warnings. They couldn't hear wisdom. In fact, in Wisdom Danced, I talked about it when the Queen of Sheba went to go see Solomon. She traveled a great distance. And think about, this is in, I can't remember what BC, but let's say it's like 5 to 1000 BC that this occurs in. Maybe you guys might know. But she's traveling with a bunch of people, a bunch of servants, a bunch of gold and jewels. Like, she was packing, right? And she travels from, let's say, Ethiopia all the way to modern day Israel. It's a long way to go to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And she did that because she wanted to see if the rumors were true. And the hardened hearts of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, when Christ says, the queen of the south rose up to come hear the wisdom of Solomon, but behold, a greater than Solomon is here. They couldn't even hear because of their hardened hearts the wisdom that Christ was revealing to them. And instead of softening their hearts, they doubled down and they called for his crucifixion. They called for his death. So in this story, love requires breaking that seal. You've got to soften the heart and open yourself to love. And love is a beautiful thing. It's not, it's kind of unlike most of the other emotions, because it's one that truly connects us. The wisdom of Christ is absolutely priceless. It is. It's priceless. It's far more than rubies, far more than gold. But they couldn't hear it, and it was standing right in front of them. Okay? Because they had hardened hearts. You're numb, you're guarded, you're holding on to tradition. You're thinking that the power imbalance is the only way to go, and we see this played out, and it's a fractal truth played out over time since the beginning of time, is pushing out wisdom. Okay. We were talking about, I was talking about Newton's cradle and the energetic resonance that happens. So we are energy, we are frequency, and we are vibration. But when our hearts are hardened, we will resist the resonance. Okay? But as we saw in the cradle synchronization, when surrounded by others that are moving in true frequency, even resistance can be softened through proximity and rhythm. So isolating is not the answer. If you're having a hardened heart, isolation is not the answer. Claiming hyper independence is not the answer. It really is opening up, being vulnerable, facing whatever that fear is, and turning that story into something that is going to serve you, and maybe even rewriting the story. Because as I was mentioning earlier, if I'm associating pain with growth or suffering with success, then I'm going to continue writing that story out. That story is going to continue playing because my nervous system is saying, this is true. This is happening. I had to rewrite a story that this is my story, was everyone I love dies around me. And that was a pretty heavy story. I had to really look at that in the mirror and say, you're not the Grim Reaper. Life does happen, but because it happens, that doesn't make you the Grim Reaper. It doesn't make you this death doula. Which is why the stories are the stories I bring to you guys, because these are my experiences. They're very deeply embedded in the things that I'm going through right now. It's very heavy. And I try to be as vulnerable as possible when I share them on my podcast live stream, because I want the people that hear it, that resonate with the message, to hear that it's okay to be going through it and that there is a pathway out. So when we're surrounded by others moving in true frequency that are softened, this is why it's really important for women to be connected with other women, and to, like, I was thinking the other day, I was like, man, I have 5 really solid friendships of women that I've had friendships with over 10 years. One of them 7, 8. But 4 women that I've had relationships, really strong relationships with for over 10 years. And they're all very valuable to me. But we miss out when we're isolating, and our digital society kind of encourages this disconnection from one another, where before We would have, multiple generations of women sitting in the tribe, connecting with one another, working together, sharing their feelings, being seen, being held, being heard. And now we really don't have that. We're seeking our soul tribes out here. We're seeking our soul tribes as women. We're doing that. But it's only when we get into these groups and having women friends that that true frequency can be expressed. Uh-oh. I might pause for a second because I'm getting a phone call. It can be softened through proximity and with that sacred rhythm. This really hits deep for me right now because when my mother got sick and died, I lost that proximity of having like a woman really strongly integrated into my life. I had a very positive relationship with my mother. She was not a tyrannical mother. But it lost that sacred rhythm. And so because of that, it might pause again for a second because they're trying to call me, but I'll give them a call back when I'm done. Because of that, the energetic resonance within me shifted. And so in healing from that, okay, now we're back. Sorry, I was getting a voicemail. I don't know why it can't just not do that, but it doesn't. Okay, so when that disruption happens, like let's say you have a friend and then that friend is like slowly kind of moves away from you, and then all of a sudden you're not having that connection with your friend for in a woman relationship, and then you feel a little betrayed, like maybe they're having other friends and not with you, and then all of a sudden that betrayal just like freezes you. Your sacred rhythm has been disrupted, and that proximity that you had with your friend that once was there is now disconnected, and that feeling, you can embed that in as a rejection, as a betrayal. I hope you can feel us loving you. I do know that I am very much well loved. um, I'm just explaining because I want people to know that it's, you don't just end up being, you don't just end up like knowing everything. It really is like moving through the motions of stuff. So the Newton's cradle study and that energetic resonance is just demonstrating how important it is for us to be in like-minded communities. Okay? So as we're thinking of, where have I hardened? What message is Amelie telling me right now that is demonstrating to me where I've been hardened? I mean, even in this, I'm like getting a lot of revelations coming in and sharing this with you guys. So it's being open and vulnerable and being softly sharing some of, these really vulnerable moments that I have. And it's not in I'm a victim kind of way. It's in a I am a real person. I'm a human being, and I'm sharing this with you because I want you to feel, oh, that there is a way out, that there is, you bring awareness into these areas of your life, that you can transition and change those into something more positive to get you out of the state that you're in and into a higher timeline. So where have you hardened? And in the next, oh my gosh, it's so good. Okay. In the next hour, we're going to be talking about inner architecture and what that looks like when we soften it. But in in looking at where we've hardened, I want you to really look at what emotional releases you can have. So, doing an activation, and maybe I'll do an activation later today, just an emotional release activation of these, this disconnect of the betrayal and the hurt and the abuse situations that, happened in our life that leave us it sits in our nervous system imprinted there. But in the next hour, we're going to be talking about some energetic rituals and frequency attunements that we can do, healing some mother and father wounds that are tied to this resistance. And we'll talk about just that heart, that sovereignty that we need, that we can rule with the softness of our voice. And it doesn't necessarily mean it always has to be soft. Sometimes you have to be very direct with what you want and what your needs are in order to be protecting yourself. Like you want your voice, you want your needs to be known. And any violation of that is a violation of your energy. And then you can take actions to say, you know what? You did this and now I'm not going to interact with that. Okay? Ooh, okay. So in continuing the in the first hour we kind of just looked at what the hardened heart looks like. And now we're going to go into the center. So before we were looking at the wall, right? Makes me think of Pink Floyd's The Wall. Mommy, should I build the wall? Like, let's go. Now we're going to look at what the center of it looks like, okay? And the first thing that I want to outline to you is just recognizing where your breath is. Are you taking full breaths? Just think about where your breathing is right now. Are you taking full breaths or are you taking small breaths? When you look at how you breathe, you can kind of tell where your nervous system is. Sometimes I notice me taking really small breaths. And in that, I'm like, okay, now you need to take deeper breaths. So really look at somatically, how is your body integrating with your energy? And if you notice that that breath is there, even breathing in and then breathing out, and then maybe even humming, something that's going to stimulate the vagus nerve that is sitting here, that is directed in your nervous system. That vagus nerve stimulation, speaking like I'm doing right now, humming, whatever sound sounds good to you, whatever feels right to you, just breathe out. I listen to somebody who does like Yove Vave and breathes that out in order to kind of connect with God, connect with that divine heavenly energy. So somatically, just recognizing where your breath is first, and then breathing out. And if you need to add a little bit of voice to it to help clear out that energy center, just having a hum, a nice om tone, or whatever tone sounds right to you, you'll know. And even when you're doing this, if you place your hand on your heart and then your other hand on your stomach and you do it, that will also help you to stimulate the vagus nerve and help you to feel safe. Now, you're doing this to soften your energy field. You're softening your energy and you're connecting with that feminine energy piece. And so when you do that, this is going to help you to feel safe. So just the connection of your hand and on your heart and on your stomach is going to help you kind of connect with the feelings and with the love connection that you have. So breathing in, taking a nice deep breath, getting air into all of the airways that you can. You could do this laying down, you can do it sitting up, you can do it standing up, whatever is comfortable to you. But this is going to help you really ground into your body and really feel present in it as well. And in this, you can also visualize yourself overcoming whatever the thing is. Let's say the thing that you're wanting to overcome is the isolation. You want to feel more connected and you don't want to isolate and appear hyper independent anymore, that you want to like connect with the people around you. So really thinking about what does that look like, visualizing it in your head. And even if you're doing this and you're not watching along and doing it with me, but putting on some music that really sets the tone of relaxation. Maybe it's ocean waves. Maybe it's thunderstorms might make you feel like excited and alive, or maybe even birds chirping or frogs or whatever sound is going to resonate with your energy. Just doing that just for 3 to 5 minutes a day can really help kind of calm you down and recenter you into your survival, from your survival into your rest and relaxation. Yeah, we do Yahweh breathing, especially before sleep. It really is nice. Dad is always encouraging us to do Yahweh breathing. He calls it, he uses it before sleep in Yah, outweigh. He reminds us constantly. There is a very, like you're breathing the breath of life. I think it's ruach or rulach. I can't remember the Hebrew word for it, but the breath of life, like you've got to have that. And if your breaths are shallow, you're in a disconnected bodily presence. Your breath should be really, enveloping all the areas of your lungs. You're breathing in that breath of life. You're hitting all of the pieces there, and then you're breathing out. Like we've got to have that breath of life in order to feel alive. And that is the goal here. We're working on feeling alive. So let's move on, and we'll talk about, now that we've got some somatic practices that you guys can integrate into your life, let's talk about the architecture of the hardened heart. So the hardened heart is really just a defense mechanism that's masquerading as strength. You're appearing strong by holding these defense mechanisms. It was really weird when my mom was sick and then when she died, any interactions that I had with people were immediately like, be strong, be strong. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? Sorry. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, I really probably did think, what the F, but what do you mean by that? What do you mean by be strong? Like, I'm always strong. That's like, I don't want to be strong. I want to be soft right now. I want to fall apart. I want to cry. I want to feel the emotion. And in being strong, it almost like pushes the emotions away and like puts them. And there is a service for that. That defense mechanism is there because you don't want to overwhelm your system. And so you do put some of these survival defense mechanisms, it puts some of the emotions on the shelf, but eventually it gets stored in like your internal emotional shelf. And then eventually you're so strong that you've got all of these things that you have to deal with, and it can cascade down, and you might display it in inappropriate situations, like in the boardroom, yelling at people. Okay, ruach. I was right. I was like, which word is it? So ruach is the Hebrew word for wind, breath, or spirit. So we want to receive that spirit, and if you're not doing that, you're not receiving. So you've got to put your body into that perspective. Yeah, the whole suck it up thing actually sucks. It does. Hi, Tyler. Good to see you. Okay. So really, the strength is a defense mechanism, or it can be a defense mechanism. So what kind of defense mechanisms might show up? Sarcasm. So people that are experiencing, that are not experiencing, but displaying sarcasm, those people are using that sarcasm as a defense mechanism to protect themselves and be vulnerable. Detachment. Now, there's good detachment, and then there's unhealthy detachment. But in the defense mechanism, we're talking about this unhealthy form of attachment or detachment, meaning that you're not connecting in meaningful ways in meaningful relationships. A good, healthy detachment might be, calling someone and not like relying on their reaction to whatever your ask is. The people that are going to be in your life are going to resonate to you in their way because you have a soft, open heart and you're ready to receive whatever it is, and you're not afraid of the result of whatever your ask is. So if I'm, you know, in my feminine embodiment that is asking for people to treat me a certain way and holding a certain level of that treatment in my system, this is the bare minimum. Anything below that, I know people say like princess treatment. Anything below princess treatment, like I don't have time for that. I'm only looking for princess treatment and above. And so that's a whole trend right now and a whole thing. And it's being, shared across the internet because it is something that people value. They value being valued, and they have to value themselves before they can do that with others. So there is a little bit of healthy detachment, but then also like just detaching from others completely in isolation is the unhealthy defense mechanism in order to not be vulnerable. So they're not using their voice to detach, they're using their silence to detach. Another defense mechanism is dominance. So somebody just shouting at you, or maybe you might be using this defense mechanism and shouting or dominating or not giving anybody, like not listening to others, not connecting, lack of compassion, lack of empathy, and really just manipulating them through this dominance path of defense mechanism that is hiding really as a strength. So they might appear to be strong because they're able to manipulate people, they're able to, perform in a certain way, but it really is a defense mechanism because of this inner hardened heart. They've put the shell around their heart instead of being open and soft. They're being really closed and defensive. They've got the wall up. The other defense mechanism is perfectionism. So perfectionism is that controlling dynamic that we were talking about. And that is a defense mechanism because if you're out there controlling, organizing everything in a perfect way so that there's no surprises, nobody can see you, everything is perfect, I think work is the best. I think work is probably the best way to like exercise this perfectionism out because nobody suspects the perfect worker. If you go to work, you perform, you meet the quotas, you get the job done, nobody looks at you twice. And it can be a perfect defense mechanism into not feeling your emotions, not being seen, not being heard. What was that? Not being chosen. So if you're thinking, "Oh, I'm the perfect model employee, that means I'm going to get the raise." No, probably not. You're not being noticed. You're you're using this perfectionism to kind of camouflage yourself into whatever environment that you're in because you're like perfectly placing everything. What are, so that's, the defense mechanism is the strength. So that is the wall that we have around us. But what is the root cause of these things? How am I doing? I'm doing all the time. I'm doing really good. It happens all the time. It does. Mike says that's how I was brought up, the whole suck it up thing. Yeah. A lot of us were. I mean, we if we start looking at, some of the messages that were suck it up, don't cry, boys don't show emotion, um, you know, and even like girls rule, boys rule. Um, there's a lot of attack on men and on women, and it's all this craziness. But let's talk about the root causes of the hardened heart, what the architecture is founded on. So one of the root causes, we kind of talked about it, is this betrayal trauma. So this could come from a parental betrayal, it could come from a familial betrayal, or even a romantic betrayal. These things stay nested in our root, and then we start to associate that vulnerability for getting hurt. So maybe you were vulnerable to your mother or your father, and then in return, they were like, no, and then you get some sort of consequence from that, and now you associate that consequence with that vulnerability. And that sits in your system until you are aware and address it and rewrite that story. Familial betrayal could be, your brother or sister or some sibling or maybe even a cousin can betray you. And it happens, at a young age, and you start to develop that belief system that that betrayal is going to happen and play out in your future relationships, or even romantic betrayals. Maybe you had a partner that cheated on you, or maybe you had a partner that did something that was just against all of your better morals and values and inner judgment. And so now that betrayal trauma is sitting nested deep in your nervous system until you are aware and address it. This next one is spiritual betrayal. And I feel that this one is very, very deep. I'm still trying to like map it out because it kind of just hit me because I've not that I haven't heard of it before, but the whole bigger macrocosm concept of it, like fractally, how it affected people was was interesting. So the spiritual betrayal could be these church wounds, God wounds, maybe even unanswered prayers, but the whole idea of the concept of hell and the messaging that was really, really pervasive in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid is, if you don't say these words and you don't get chosen by God, then you're going to hell, was a huge spiritual betrayal. So add on top of that familial betrayal, parental betrayal, add on top of that the God wound, that church wound of if you are not chosen, if you're not this, if you're not that, if you don't say these words, if you don't subscribe to our doctrine, then you're going to hell. You're rejected. You're unworthy. You're unlovable. You know, God's judgment is on you. That is such a huge root cause of pain in our society. And I experienced it as a child, and so I can speak on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is huge. It happens all the time. Deal with it. Yeah, that is that is definitely like one of those things. Um, and then so this huge spiritual betrayal like is nested even if you didn't go to church. Even just hearing that and then thinking that it's believable is still nesting in your nervous system. And it really is these wounded that are sharing these things, right? So Maybe it was a form of dominance. If you don't join my church, you're going to hell and you're going to suffer everlasting gnashing of teeth or whatever they said. And so that spiritual betrayal really sits in our systems. And we may not even recognize it. So bringing awareness to that, maybe there was unanswered prayers. Maybe, somebody was dying. You're just like trying to bargain, and that unanswered prayer that you were bargaining is, still sitting in that system, in your system. Then the other root cause of this are survival narratives. So the survival narratives are nobody is coming, so I must lead alone. And that really feeds into that defense mechanism where you need to be strong because there's nobody else around you that's going to help hold you up and support you. So if we look at these root causes, the hardened heart is kind of like this fortress. You're building this wall, and then once it's needed to protect you in the moment, but now it's become a prison. Now it's a prison. And that's where the hardened heart needs a little bit of softening. Because we don't want to be isolated. I think most of us can agree with that. I think we like our alone time, but we don't like to be alone all of the time. Even for people that are in that isolation, it can be really deafening. It can be silencing. You're not going to learn very much about yourself if you're not interacting with others. We need to have this interaction with other people. One of the reasons why I started doing my deep dive into the digital age, and I'm writing a book about it right now, but once I really started looking into it, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I saw the whole architecture of what is going on. And then I'm like, what is the root cause here? And, some of it is what I'm talking about right now. These things can cause fear of powerlessness, a fear of power, a fear of showing up, a fear of being chosen, a fear of not being chosen. Like, the fear is real. And every single fear boils down when we're looking at the survival state of our bodies. Every fear boils down to fear of death. No, we don't have to just deal with it. Demons be gone in the name of Jesus. I think he was saying it happens all the time. Deal with it as this saying that we heard when we were younger. Do you guys think you have to go to church to worship God? I don't believe so. We are temples. That's what it says. So we do want to restore temples. We do want to restore inner sanctuary, but we want to do it with a soft heart, with this ideal of holding to our morals and values within our own systems, and to not be masquerading in these defense mechanisms, but to be present in ourselves, not to be worrying about the future or doubting yourself because of the past, but to be really present with yourself. And that's why we started with some somatic breathing. We need that somatic armor to really just be present in ourselves and know that we're safe. We want to know that we're safe. We want to know that we're protected. And, we do that by connecting with our inner masculine. People with so one of the emotional intelligence pieces is called personal power. And it's all around your self-worth, your confidence, and, how you carry yourself, what your values are. You know who you are, and that's personal power. And then being able to sit in your personal power and hold that in a present form. Like, you're present. You're not in the future, you're not in the past. You're present in your body. You're connected. And you're relaxed, and you're relaxing without guilt, So, our heart walls and our somatic armor are what we're going to talk about next. So, when we have moments of grief or certain things that kind of hit us and activate these defense mechanisms, if we keep the armor on, it will just keep on adding more and more layers to that heart piece. So when we want to look at how this physically ends up, like it physically ends up in your fascia. So you have fascia in your body, and you might feel certain pains like in your muscles, or maybe even certain pains in certain parts of your body. Maybe, you have you're constantly feeling like the pain where there's the, like in between the shoulder blade, where you feel like the world's on your, or maybe you even like sit and position your posture where you're like kind of in a turtle shell protecting your heart. Your body will start to give you these signals of, hey, there's pain stored here, there's grief stored here, we need to address it. And it can start to, really affect you. A lot of people have back or spine pain, and that is your body's way of speaking to you, because spiritually you couldn't hear it, mentally you couldn't hear it, emotionally you couldn't hear it, and now it's showing up physically as a way of, hey, please address this, emotional, mental, spiritual issue, so that we can, relieve the tightness in our bodies. So it shows up as armor in our fascia that's located in our body. It can show up in your jaw. It can show up in your womb. It can show up in your spine, like I said. It can show up all over the body. And it's the body's way of storing these situations in your body. So if we're really truly doing embodiment, we want to feel, where is the numbness, where is the tightness, where is the ache in my body, where are these things, where is it? And then breathe and sound. So sound frequency, because we're all energy, frequency, and vibration. So sound is going to help kind of move that through. And I have tuning forks that I use to help kind of move that stuff around. But breath can help start unlocking it as well. So you focus on that and then listen to, what is this telling me? And even certain areas of your body, the right side or the left side, can even go even further. The front side, the back side can go even further in saying, okay, this pain in your ankle is associated with this. And you can kind of look that up online and just dive deeper into it. I like doing that because I'm gathering all the information, and then I'm looking at the information of, okay, how is that? Let me see if, the pain in my knee is associated with a disagreement that I had with somebody, on the phone. And, maybe I need to reach out to them and apologize for that and correct my behavior, or, you know, really look to speaking whatever is true for me, and do that and see if that helps you to correct the pain. And sometimes we sleep on them funny, and that's fine too. So we're listening into, where in our body is the tightness, where is the ache, where is the pain, where is the numbness. And then when we feel into it, we breathe, and we have sound playing, and then we work on unlocking, what is that, what is my body telling me that I need to be aware of, and then become aware of it, address it, and then move on to the next thing, because we always got a next thing. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the frequency of softness as a divine strength. Okay, so we talked about defense mechanisms being strengths. you have to come and visit and see our chiropractor. He is all about fascial release and super cool guy. He's seen a lot of people, you know. I would love to. That sounds fun. The kingdom of God is within, Mike. So obviously, don't need to go anywhere for that. It certainly is. But we can. That doesn't mean that we don't connect with our community, right? So in our society, because of the rejection of this mother wisdom, feminine energy, and archetype, softness is seen as weakness. We see a whole host of women right now becoming boss babes, becoming like hustling for the money, motivation Monday. Don't appear weak. Because if you are emotional or you cry or, you know, whatever it is, that softness, that moment of vulnerability is weakness. And now you're going to be torn apart by the lions and die, right? But if we're looking at it in a divine order, a divine harmony way, it really is a divine strength to be soft. And think about how many people are not soft. I think of the softness of a woman that's able to go and dance when nobody else is dancing, to speak when nobody else has the courage to do so. That's strength. What do they say? Um, Dance like no one is watching. I can't remember the whole thing, but you get what I mean. There's this divine strength that comes in when you can tap into this frequency of softness. It's not weakness. The softness that you experience is actually magnetism. People will be magnetized to you. Like, what has she got? What has he got? You're magnetic when you can speak. You're magnetic when you can be present. And it also is this sacred receptivity. You're not going to be connected to divine order. You're not going to be connected to the heavenly realm if you cannot be soft. You've got to be relaxed. You've got to feel rested in order to get to that point where your body can repair and regenerate. And it can repair and regenerate. I've seen it. You can, like, it literally is like this life elixir, this elixir of life, this elixir of beauty is being connected to the heavenly realm, to be in connection with your spirit self, to its spiritual source. So that sacred receptivity is also going to bring you insight. It's what gave Solomon the wisdom to share as king of Israel. So Mary Magdalene was a soft strength. Okay? She wept, she anointed, and aside from John and maybe, you know, some Roman soldiers, I don't know who else was staying at the cross, but she stayed present at the cross. She was connected. It wasn't weakness that she did that. In fact, it was a divine strength for her to be able to stay there when all the other disciples ran away, except for John. Mary was there, and she was that soft strength, that divine strength of weeping in compassion and empathy and loss and feeling the feelings of that situation, of anointing and being anointed. She was anointed. You know, I was thinking about the oil piece, and it really is like this wisdom is that oil that you need to have in your light as you're carrying it through through life. You want to be lit up, right? We want to be the light of the world, but we can't be the light of the. So if you were born before a certain time, I was born in the 80s and I still remember oil lamps. But you used to have to buy this oil and pour it in, and then you'd have the little wick and you'd be able to turn it up and turn it down, however. But those were normal to have these oil lights. And so in order to be lit, you had to have the oil in the lamp. And the oil would run out eventually. And but if we look at the oil as like this connection with our spirit, connection with wisdom, connection with logos, being anointed is important. And it helped her to stay present, not run away. She stayed present in at the cross. It's really funny. I've been playing at my son. It's summer vacation, and we've been playing Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game, and it's interesting seeing like because we're sharing the same character. It's interesting seeing how I interact with the world and how he interacts with the world. So he's like going and fighting the hardest things and really carrying out this heroism, like he's like this divine hero, like he's just going for it. He goes and fights he's defeated all the monsters in the game, and he does it without like he just does it like nice and easily. Me, I'm a little bit like, okay, I'm gonna go and steal their lunch. I'm gonna go steal their lunch money, and or like sneaking around and trying to be really strategic in how I approach attacking the goblins and the moblins. And I don't know if you guys have ever played it, but it's really interesting to see like how present we are with the character and playing that out. And then the last piece I want to say is, in this frequency of softness, as we're looking at the feminine energy as this divine strength, the sound is a healer. Voice work, so screaming, crying, humming, singing, anything that you're doing with your voice, even me speaking, is a way for me to like really filter out a lot of anger and rage that I have a hard time expressing. So just me being present here, speaking, using my voice and sharing my soul's aches and brilliances and magnificence and some of the hard things that I go through and the tears that we shed. So weeping over something that makes us happy, makes us sad. I was watching a video today and I was like, started having my tears well up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just really emotional. But this is the soul's way of softening that hardened stone. So if you're a woman and you're watching this and you're saying, I never cry or I don't cry, you might have a hardened heart, and reach out to me and we can work together. I have a really nice program called Claiming a Sovereign Queendom. I'm filling up spaces now. This is going to help restore your voice and your identity. And we go through so many identity shifts. And the identity shifts cause us to really harden our hearts, to set up these huge walls around us. And when really I think our inner calling is saying, hey, soften. Be who you are. Let's get you back into your identity. Okay. So that's the frequency of softness. And when we look at our next portion here, we're going to be looking at the masculine and feminine heart and how we're going to heal the split of these. Okay? So the hardened heart is a result of unhealed polarity wounds. So polarity is like, these two different sides. So if we're looking at masculine and feminine, that's a polarity. Okay? The feminine will close when she is not safe. So that feminine energy closes when they don't feel safe. And the masculine energy hardens when it's not trusted. So we need this trust and safety piece in the relationship. And I know Mike remembers. I can't remember the gentleman who came in and was like, "What's the most important thing in a marriage relationship?" And he was trying to say appreciation, which is important. I'm not downplaying it whatsoever. But really, it's being loved and being trusted. So a man wants to be trusted that his sight is the good is the sight that we're moving down, that vision. And this could be, in your own system. You have to have your own inner vision and your own inner world really squared up too. So if there's any unhealed polarity from within, that's going to be sitting in your nervous system and it's going to be expelled and played out in real life unless you start to address it. So the feminine will close when she doesn't feel safe. And that's when the hardening starts. And the same thing comes for the masculine. That hardens when it's not, and when there's things it's not trusting. There's no trust there. So you've got to trust yourself and you've got to feel safe within your own system. And that's why we do the breath work. That's why we listen to our body and we become present in it. So how does this show up? It shows up in, oh, Fast Bear, welcome. It shows up in dating, right? And if you haven't dated, you're probably in a good state. But if you have dated, you'll notice that there really is this trepidation. Like there's this openness that you've got to go out and be vulnerable with somebody new. But when the feminine doesn't feel safe or the man doesn't feel trusted, the unhealed polarity of that situation is going to result in a separation. Unhealed polarity wounds in parental relationships, you might see that play out in your own life. I mean, anybody that's been in been a child of divorce or even a child where the parents have separated are going to feel this unhealed polarity wound unless the parents addressed it and resolved it. Okay? And then I did talk a lot about the unhealed polarity that plays out in leadership roles, so in business roles, in religious institutions, in national institutions. If there's unhealed polarity, you're going to see these really deep extremes of things playing out through the unhealed polarity ones. And a lot of this is, not feeling safe. And so you'll see a lot of people when, the women don't feel safe, there's ways that she will react. She might seem a little belligerent. In fact, I was kind of perusing the YouTube feed, and because of the things that I've been sharing, my algorithm is set in a certain way. So I have all these archetypal stories that are playing out, and I was looking up Lilith and really trying to understand, the Lilith archetype in the Bible. And it was coming, maybe she said something and then was attacked for it and then took that seriously and then didn't feel safe. I mean, even the whole Karen archetype that is in our society right now is from women speaking up because they don't feel safe. So obviously I don't want to be a Karen, but at the same time, that is almost like the spell to cause you to not speak up when things need to be said. So I see it kind of as this Karen spell, let's call it. And then the masculine hardens when it's not trusted. Okay? And so they might show that with defense mechanism like domination. Right? sarcasm. Those things might start showing up when that masculine isn't trusted. So you see it in leadership. So when we look at how we are holding our own polarities, we want to be doing this inner work to resolve those things. So we want to do this for the sake of each other. Because remember Newton's cradle, our own inner resonance is going to start resonating with others. So let's look at the American nation. So the United States of America is a nation. We have the Constitution that sets up our government, the Bill of Rights that outline our rights. And the way that our nation is set up is that the people are the power. Okay? They're the ones at the top. But it's all inverted. We don't see it that way right now because we have this fear of power within our own selves. We've given agency over to these government institutions instead of taking back our agency and the responsibility and the work that comes into it, because it's not an easy thing. But when we start doing the inner work, when we start addressing our inner temples, and we start to really heal this polarity from within and start to soften our hearts, that's when our nation can actually turn around. That's why I'm doing this work. Because I understand how resonance works. I understand how energy works. I understand the importance of holding a frequency. And if our frequency is in this unhealed, wounded lack of polarity within our own temples, that's what we're seeing right now. That's why people are protesting. That's why people say what they do. That's why the interactions are the way that they are. That's why we see the world in the way that we do. And if we're listening to end times prophecies, you're going to hell if this or that, if you don't vote for me, then the nation is going to endure an apocalypse or whatever they say. And you start to believe it because you're giving that agency, you're giving your voice over to these, people in leadership or perceived leadership. You're giving over your sovereignty. And your sovereignty is a sacred technology. It is consent. That sovereignty is your consent. The universal law of consent is 100% related to your sovereignty. So when you start doing the inner work, you're starting to look at, okay, what am I giving my agency over? What am I giving my sovereignty over to? And what do I need to do in order to correct it? What do I need to do in order to take that back and hold responsibility and authority and sovereignty within my own system, to be present and connected and showing up as my person that I'm meant to be, in my purpose, in my identity, even if your identity is fluid like mine, which is fine. I still have a personality, but my identity just kind of shifts from here and there. And I'm okay with that. I understand that about myself. I've done the inner work and I don't need to show up as other people. I just show up as the inconsistent, fluid me. Okay, so to find out more, there's some mystic stories that you can listen, that you can learn about. So Saint Teresa of Avila is one that's an interesting person to. And I might even do a full thing on her. It would be really fun to investigate her. But here she's looking at the inner castle and where the soul journeys inward to meet God. So earlier Mike said, do you guys think we have to go to church to worship God? Absolutely not. We only need to go inward and do that inner work to meet God. And we meet God, we meet Logos and wisdom when we do that. So once we start this healing process and we get these polarities to be a little bit more like present and connected and in this synchronistic energy flow with each other, then our system is demonstrating to us that now you are safe. Now you can rest. Now you can repair. Now you can regenerate. And then, and only then, have I even discovered, and I've heard other people say this as well, only when you are in that parasympathetic nervous system state do you get these like direct feeds, this connection to God. And that's when things start becoming a little wild and out defy expectation, defy physics as we know it from our 3D bodies. So this system that once we get it corrected, this is where the mystics can go inside and start those soul journeys inward, and then they can meet God. The other story I want to share with you is Lilith's exile. So Lilith has this hardened heart from forced submission. Okay? And the exile, she's redeemed in her reclamation of herself. From what I can tell, there's not very much. This is very much a dark feminine energy, in my opinion. But I think we all can know that there are some women out there that have been forced into submission, and even men as well, where there's forced submission, and that can lead to a hardened heart. So think of that dominating, overbearing, you know, parent, spouse, whomever, boss. I think there was a lot of that during the pandemic, some forced submission that really hardened the hearts of a lot of people. They're like, I want to maintain my sovereignty. I don't want to consent to this. But then it was like, you're killing grandma if you don't do X, whatever the X was. So it really is sitting in presence, and you can reclaim that sovereignty. You can reclaim that consent, even if it seems hard in the moment. It, it's your path to redemption. So the queen archetype is another mystic ideal that we're going to be looking at, this archetype. So she rules with this open heart and with a fierce grace. So she's not closing her heart and ruling with a closed fist. She's ruling with an open heart and a fierce grace. So that queen archetype is really playing out. And then the other mystic story, we already talked about it, but Christ did not resist the cross. He opened his heart wider by going to the cross. Okay? That required a lot of softness, and I just got a phone call, so I might. Yeah. Or you will lose your job. Like, that was another threat. Do this or you'll lose your job. So those are some of the mystic stories that we can use as medicine as we're really looking at how do we soften the heart. And I think I might do a nice Saint Teresa of Avila. Okay. Now, as we're looking at certain rituals or devotions that we can do to soften our heart, we're really just, what we're doing here is we're de-armoring our heart. So salt and honey baths are a way to kind of cleanse and nourish our bodies. I also like to use Epsom salt. You want to relax your body as much as possible. I love Epsom salt baths, and even salt baths. The other thing that you can do is just lay on the earth. So put a blanket down and just lay on the earth, and think about certain grief and release that. Just think, like, I've laid on the ground in a park, and sometimes I can even, like, as I'm pulling myself up, I can feel the earth like pulling and from my body, just certain energy. So the grounding that happens, it's an interesting science. Like when you're grounding, so our body has a lot of crystals in it, so it does really connect with the earth. But it's taking it out. It's almost like this energy dialysis. So when you have kidney dialysis, what happens is you know, um, they put a tube in your body, connected to your kidneys, and what the kidneys do is it filters the blood. Well, when you have renal failure, it's unable to do that. So they'll put a thing in, they'll run it through a filter process that normally the kidneys would do in order to take some of the toxins out of the blood system. So when you ground, it's almost like this energy dialysis in that same way that it's filtering out all of this negative energy that's sitting in your body. But you can do that laying on the earth, whether it's a beach, sand, or whether it's in a park or wherever it is in your backyard. Just lay down and then release grief. If you've got to cry, cry. If you've got to scream, scream. Just just do what your body is really saying to you. And then another energy ritual you can do is anointing your heart with oil. So, rose or frankincense oils are helpful to anoint. So, you just want to anoint your heart area as you're doing that. And it will help to, the rose oil, particularly the Bulgarian rose oil, it's the most expensive oil. I have a little dram of it. It's like an eighth of an ounce dram, or maybe even less than that. And it was like $100 for this like little tiny dram of rose oil, Bulgarian rose oil. But that rose oil has the highest frequency energy of all the oils. And so the same thing kind of goes into this frankincense. I'll drop some frankincense oil in my bath to raise the energy, to anoint my body, but also do this energy cleansing in my bath as it's like pulling all of these energy bits out of my system, and it really helps to rest. Some spiritual practices that you can do is the practice of weeping as a worship. So, weeping in gladness. A lot of the time when I read Christ's story on the cross, or just like read about that story, or even some of the other moving characters, like I find myself just weeping in gladness that, this story sits there. Like I'm resonating with it. And I'm in such awe and inspired, divinely inspired by the message in the story, that I start weeping. And it's a form of worship. The tears are coming out, right? I told you that tear technology, as it's coming out, is a way to help soften. What was the other one? Our voice, doing voice work. So even crying out loud, even if it's in joy, like just having that weeping moment as a worship. Journaling can be helpful, especially if you can get yourself into a flow state. And that's why it's a nice meditative way of expressing yourself. But journaling, where is my heart still hard? And having that prompt and just writing that out. Where's my heart still hard? You can think about it and then just start writing about stuff. And then, we did talk about the humming or the singing, but doing that where it's in the chest. Absolutely beautiful form of worship. Yes. But doing devotional singing, so singing or even humming into your chest and expressing that or getting that out, that is going to help you just somatically express yourself and really soften the heart piece. And good to see you, Deborah. And then relationship repair. You can do some mirror work. So if whatever the situation is, you can just look in a mirror and say, I see you and I won't abandon you. I did a beautiful episode on self-abandonment the other week. And what I found about self-abandonment is it's a lack of self-love. So when you say, I see you, I love you, you're worth it, and you tell that to yourself in the mirror, it starts to change the way that you activate. Remember when I said that the mind doesn't know the factor fiction, the fiction or reality, like what it's thinking and imagining versus, what is actually happening in your 3D physical realm. If you're telling yourself negative things, like your body remembers it. It's if you're saying those things, it's your body's way of saying like, hey, look into this, look into that. Okay? So doing that mirror work of saying I see you, I love you, I'm holding you, I'm not going to abandon you. You're held is going to help repair your relationship with yourself and with that inner masculine feminine within. And then the other relationship repair that you can do is learning how to receive without earning it. So that perfectionism piece that I was talking about, you're putting all these pieces in motion because one, you want to camouflage yourself, but two, you think that maybe if everything looks perfect, then you'll be chosen, and that's just not the case. That if that happens, it's a rare thing, and if it happens, there might be a red flag. But you want to learn how to receive without earning it. So I had a hard time understanding that concept of works versus grace, faith and grace, in being chosen. So it really is this like learning how to receive and not thinking you have to do something in order to earn it. So there's no conditions. It's an unconditional love that you're really operating in when you can receive without having to do. All right. So in ending this live stream, I've been going for a couple hours now, but in ending this live stream, I want to let you know that I don't really do these as breakdowns, but just as crowning rituals for you guys. And I want you to, really think about your heart as a garden. Are you frozen over as it's frozen? Can you think of it melting and what it would look like when spring arrives and summer arrives? And then because that divine light is shining on that heart as a garden, we want to be the light of the world. So I also want you to really, embed into your nervous system that you are safe now. Whatever happened to you before, whatever the thing that is sitting in you, you are safe and you are worthy of receiving love and trust and of receiving, the things that delight you and of living out your purpose in harmony. Now, just a matter of, supporting me. I have a beautiful course right now. It's a 4-week course. It's for women only at the moment. It is my first official launch, but it is called Claiming Your Sovereign Queendom. And this is for women to really identify their own identity. So maybe you know somebody that has some identity or some issues with speaking their voice or anything like that. This is for that woman. So, we go through so many transitions as mothers, as grandparents, getting married, getting divorced. Like, all of these things have an impact on our identity and who we are. And maybe even when you're like a new mother, or maybe you're a mother that's just been carrying the load in the home, that can all weigh on you and you can lose yourself in that. So, my program is helping you to reconnect with that woman who you are and just carrying that in this beautiful divine harmony. We go through 10 different domains of our lives. And the domains range from spirit and love to body to family to our community. Like, we look at all of these domains and we really deep dive into why it's important. I got case studies to help support it. And then I also have just some little activities that we do to really look deeply into how am I aware of what's going on here and how do I become sovereign in my this domain? How do I become sovereign in that domain? And it really helps to bring back that agency, bring back your presence and your awareness. So that one is 222, which is a great price. And then the other program that I have is called Essence Over Engines, and this is a co-ed program. It is also a group program. That one is more on emotional and social intelligence development. So you're developing your soft skills on how to connect with others, how to connect with yourself, how to become a really proper leader. We're talking about authority and agency and sovereignty. These are all important aspects of leadership. And so you want to be connected with yourself in order to have a proper connection with others. So let's say that you maybe lead a person or you lead a team or you lead an organization even. This can be really, really helpful to develop. My system is a little bit different because I focus on the nervous system of not just you, but the nervous system of whatever the community that you have. So whatever that team connection is. So this one is, like I said, is co-ed. It is scalable. It could be an intimate group setting, or it could be, a company-wide setting. So if that is of interest to you, please reach out to me. I also have Soulistic Soul Maps, and those are found on Buy Me a Coffee /Celestic, and or you can support me there with a donation if this has been really activating and helpful for you. And I am going to be, I think there's another announcement that needs to be said, that I'm going to be probably splitting the future live streams up to where the first 45 minutes to an hour is available on YouTube, and then have a separate behind a paywall of the remainder of the activation and of the message with a small fee, just to have a private community and everyone can come in there and be a part of that. So I will make my announcements later. But for the time being, I still have my Digital Age series, which is investigating the effects of the digital integration from analog to digital over the last, I think since the 70s, 80s, and looking at that in a deep dive session. And, we're going to get more into a little bit transhumanism, but then I'm going to get a little bit more into solutions here soon. I still have to do the cryptocurrency. I still need to do the educational impact. And then the fact that children were used as beta testers for this digital integration during the pandemic time, where, they, instead of being in the classroom, now they're in these digital classrooms, but there was no case studies that were ever done on what the impact of a child being integrated into screens as much as they were. There was no case study to see, like, what is the developmental issues, what are the things that we're looking out for. It was just implemented and everyone just kind of accepted it. So we're going to be looking at that as well. And then I have a couple other areas that I wanted to discuss, but those are just some of the things that I was working on at the moment. So you should see a little bit more this week. And oh, I got a comment here. I've thought about it before how strange crying is. As far as I know, only humans have water come out of their eyes when they feel strong emotion. That's interesting. I have to look that up. A little bit more about crying technology. But if you're here and you've made it this far, please subscribe to my channel, like and or comment on the channel as well. I love to hear, a little bit about how this has activated you, and where it took you, and maybe share just a little bit of insight on that. And also, I appreciate you guys, everybody, for watching and supporting me, and obviously giving up your attention. There's a lot of things online that you can watch, but you just chose to watch this channel. So I really deeply appreciate you, and I'm so thankful for you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will post my schedule later. All right, take care. Bye.